Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to budget build your monk, taking a look at how to get the most out of your money on the auction house, as well as showing you the most efficient skills to use. Let's get started. What's up you guys, it's Jaded. So I'm going to go ahead and start this off with how to itemize. Now taking a look here at the shopping list, you can see I spent under 10 million, and this is a set that will work in Monster Power 4. Now Monk is definitely one of the harder classes to build for. They need nearly every stat. Being melee and having a sort of a lackluster skill set, it can be a bit rough, but you can see here we did do pretty well. Now another thing before we get going on this, I want to preface this with the auction house always is changing, of course. You have to realize that when looking at this video. If you're looking at this a month, 2 months, 3 months from now, all the gear that you see here, obviously going to be much cheaper, and you're going to be able to get a lot better gear for the same price. But because of that, I'm going to go over each individual item so you can understand like what stats you need on gloves and boots, amulets, rings, and weapons, things like that. So that whenever you go out and build your own set, you can make the proper decisions. Now, before you get going on anything item-wise, you're going to have to decide what resist your monk's going to be. This is because of the passive one with everything, which is what we're going to be using, and what nearly every single monk uses. So I personally decided to go with poison. Now, the way I went about it is you're going to want to resist that demon hunters don't want. That's how I went about it. So demon hunters, they want physical resist, arcane, and fire. But everything else is really up for grabs. So if you want poison, go with poison. If you want cold, go with cold. And, of course, there's lightning as well. Some monks do go with fire because you can get it on Cinder Coat. Cinder Coat's a very cost-effective item, and you can roll double that resist to get really high fire resist on that item. So starting first here with the weapons. Now, I went with the Wong Kim Lao. This is a very, very cost-effective item that's going to up your DPS. It doesn't up your sheet DPS as much as it should because of the lightning skill increase, and nearly all of your damage is lightning. There's very little that's not lightning with the build that I'm using. I got this one for 50k, pretty good steal there. You're not going to find a lot at that price, but none of these items did I snipe or wait for. I just picked up what was on the auction house at the time. So you're going to have very similar deals maybe elsewhere if you don't find something like this. Now you can find it with crit damage and a socket, but those are typically very expensive, at least if they have, decent DPS on them. So that was the main hand that I went with. It's also very effective offhand if you get a better main hand. But looking at my offhand here, basically if you don't go with the Wong Kim Lao, you're going to want the following. You're going to want a socket, you're going to want crit damage, you're going to want life on hit, maybe some life steal. Life steal not that important because our DPS starting out is going to be very low, and typically life steal is for much higher DPS characters. And then you can get vitality, you can get dexterity, really a mix of any of that, whatever your build is needing. So maybe you don't want to go for weapons first. You might want to hold off and get them later. But for this build, I actually have way too much sustain, and I know it's not like I have too much, but I definitely could have been more cost effective. So I'm going to show amulet next. Amulet and rings are typically something you want to look for at the very end because you kind of want to get the leftover stats that you are missing. But this amulet I picked up is very unique because it has a ton of life on hit, 900 life on hit. And it's very rare to find something like this. It was really the only one on the auction house at the time. I got it for 1.3 mil, not a bad pickup for the stats you're getting. So Monk really itemizes towards attack speed and crit chance, because attack speed is giving you your sustain. It just gives you a lot better flow to the gameplay, and it's something that you really need. Unlike the Barbarian, which maybe itemizes for attack speed after they get a lot of crit damage, with Monk it's definitely much more needed. So you can see here, very weird amulet. I didn't get any main stat. Didn't get any crit damage, but it's still a very, very effective item because essentially what I could do here is instead of getting life on hit on my offhand, I could swap that for some more crit damage, get very high crit damage, maybe 80-90%, and then, just get some high dex, high vite. And that might save you 20 mil on a really nice weapon just because it doesn't have sustain on it. So you definitely have some options to look for. Now moving on to helmet, another area where we have a couple things to choose from here. Now you can go with your typical rare, all resist, dex, vite, socket, crit chance, rare helmet. But I went ahead and opted for an Andariel's, and this is because I went poison, and these always have poison resist. You could even get them with all resist like I did. Of course, it's not very much, but it's a little something. It gives us crit chance, gives us attack speed, and I was lucky enough to find one with a very low fire damage increase. Now, if you add a socket in here, you're looking at upwards of 3 mil, maybe even more. So it wasn't exactly viable for me to pick one up with a socket, but definitely still a cost-effective item. Other options are Inna's. Inna's is decent. You can also get the 2-piece set bonus with Inna's, which is 130 dex. Moving on now to gloves. Again, you're going to want dex, you're going to want your resist, and then you're going to want attack speed, crit chance, and of course crit damage if you can get it, but we're looking at 100k gloves here. I mean, you can't ask for more than this. You can, however, get a lot more dex on gloves. You can get up to 300, just like your boots. So that may be why these are on the very cheap side. And speaking of boots, similar thing here. Dex, vite, all resist, poison resist, and your movement speed. Again, very cheap, probably due to the lower dex, but that's something that you'll, increase later on. Or maybe look for a set boots like Natalia's. But I definitely recommend getting movement speed here. Moving on now to bracers. Now you can go with Lacunis for bracers, if you want the extra movement speed. In the end, my build was only rocking 11% movement speed, which is kind of rough, but you get by. Eventually you can get Inna's pants, which have movement speed as well, but that's later down the road. So for bracers here, you're looking at dex, vitality, your resist, maybe some all resist, and a very high crit chance here. Crit chance, very important to this build due to the way Cyclone works. And again, if you could find one with higher stats, the more the better, maybe some armor. These have strength though, that also is an added bonus due to the armor that gives, of course. Now moving on to your chest and your pants. So in these two areas, you're going to want to find very high vitality because vitality is one of the higher rolls for chest and pants. You can get 300 here as well, but typically you're looking at about 200. You can't really get away with much more than that if you're getting sockets. So again, dex, vitality very high, a couple sockets, maybe 3 if you're lucky. Get your all resist, get your poison resist or whatever resist you're rocking, and that's basically it. Get as much armor as you can, all that good stuff. You can definitely play with the stats here. So say you don't have 2 sockets, you can search for something with a lot more dex. And you can kind of play with those dex and vitality rolls until you find something very cheap. Now moving on to belt, again, very standard belt. Maybe much later you're going to pick up a witching hour, but that is a very expensive item. And for now, we're just going to get the basic stat rolls that you typically see on a belt. Just try to get something very similar here. You can also get a lot more vitality than I did, but it just depends what's up on the AH at the time. And shoulders, very similar to the belt. You're looking at nearly identical stats. You can also get % life on either of these. However, when you add in the % life, you're looking at much more expensive gear typically. But you can drop like 30 vitality and try to opt for like some 8% life if you can find that. But again, those are usually priced pretty high. Another stat you may want to look for is pickup radius. And you can get this on a lot of things, but typically you can get away with it on your shoulders or your belt because you're not looking for too many stats like crit chance and that. So if you can get some with some pickup radius, at least on one of your pieces. I did not go for any of that. And if I played this character a lot, that'd be something that would frustrate me. So definitely try to get some pickup radius. Now, last but not least, we're looking at rings here. As you can see, I picked up a Wailing Host. I was really surprised to see these come so far down in price. These used to be quite expensive, but you don't have to pick up this ring. You're not looking for the set bonus anyways, typically. But for rings, you're going to want to get your crit chance there, and you're going to want to get some damage range. Damage range is very, very important on rings. It boosts your overall damage just a crap ton, and more often than not, it doesn't add a whole lot to the ring's value. So again, you're going to want to get a lot of main stats, dex, vitality. You're going to want to get poison resist. Typically, you can't get all resist on these without adding a lot of value to them. So just get your main resist and get crit chance, get crit damage, get attack speed if you can, but typically you can only afford crit chance for the low value. So now all of this coming together, what did we actually get out of this? So I was pleasantly surprised to see how much resist I ended up with. we're looking at almost 900 all resist, which is pretty crazy for a budget build. We're looking at 38.5 unbuffed crit chance, 170 crit damage, so definitely an area to improve is our crit damage. 40k DPS, which isn't exactly how much DPS we're outputting due to the Wan Kim Lao. 2.7% lifesteal, and probably the crazier stat that maybe doesn't need to be this high is our life on hit at 1.5k. Typically I aim for about 900, but you know, it doesn't hurt. It definitely helps. And as we replace some of these items, you know, you can spare to lose some of that as you get more DPS. So if we're gonna improve from here on out, I would say definitely more crit damage and maybe just more overall main stats. You know, you want more dex, you want more vitality. I had to go ahead and gem for vitality. Really just gem for whatever you're missing. If you need more vite, gem for vite. If you need more dex, gem for dex. So that pretty much covers all the gear. Let's go ahead and move on to the skills. So I'm just going to go over the skills really fast here. Fist of Thunder is pretty much, you know, the only primary you're looking to use. It's a small gap closer, not that effective, you know, mobility wise, but it still helps. And it's the fastest attacking primary as well, which is a strange choice by Blizzard. But anyways, moving on. Breath of Heaven, this is really just use it like a buff. You don't really use it as much as a heal. You just keep it active every 45 seconds. Make sure that's always up, 15% damage. Blinding Flash, another damage boost if you need it. Great for killing elites, you know, to stop the damage income. Sweeping Wind with Cyclone, this is really quite a bit of your damage output. And Cyclone is also why you do so much lightning damage as well. Your mantra, this is the only mantra that people are using nowadays. It just gives you a massive DPS increase. And it does take a large portion of spirit every time you use it, but you know, it's giving you an extra 24% on top of the already 24% damage increase. So very effective mantra, especially in a party. And the last one is pretty much your CC breaker. It also is your immunity to damage, and that is Serenity. And I just use the rune that increases the duration. For passives, One with Everything is going to give you a lot of resist when you stack like that one poison resist that I'm doing. You can just stack a lot of resist for very cheap. And until they nerf it in the future, you know, it's still always going to be good. Seize the Initiative, another defensive passive, and you'll notice the trend here, all three of these are defensive. There's just not a lot of great offensive ones to use. This one just increases your armor by your dex. And then Resolve, this is kind of a up in the air passive that you can really pick and choose. If you need the survivability, Resolve's pretty good. You can also reduce your cooldowns, which can save your life as well. Increase your dodge chance, increase your movement speed. This one's kind of up for you to choose and see what you like the most. But yeah, that's the whole kit. The reason this is such an effective and popular build is because you're basically just hammering Fist of Thunder the whole time. Occasionally you pop Breath of Heaven for the buff, occasionally you pop Blinding Flash, and you just want to keep Sweeping Wind up the whole time. And then whenever you just have extra spirit to spend, you know, drop your mantra down again, get that extra damage increase, and of course Serenity when you need to get that CC out of the way. Now if you're finding that you don't need Breath of Heaven, you can actually swap that for Deadly Reach with Foresight, and on the third strike of Foresight, you're going to get 18% damage increase for 30 seconds. So it's very similar, but you know, it's kind of a more fun way to do the combo system. You just have to make sure you're always getting that third strike with Deadly Reach, and then you can drop Resolve or whichever you were using for that Combination Strike, which also increases your damage by 16% if you're using both of your primaries. So you do have some options to work with. But that's going to do it for me, guys. Thanks for watching my guide here on building a budget monk. Hopefully you guys learned something if you're building one yourself. If you take the time to find some really good deals on the auction house, you'll be surprised at how efficient you can be in the current state of the game. So thanks for hanging out with me, and if you guys like what you see, you want to see more videos, hit that subscribe button and there'll be more to come. Peace, guys.